is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, esteemed laureates, members of the Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen. As King's Commissioner in Zeeland and as President of the Roosevelt Foundation, it's my privilege and my pleasure to welcome you to the 19th For Freedoms ceremony here in Middelburg. We are here today to honor those individuals and organizations who fearlessly and steadfastly are dedicated to bring about human rights for everyone, everywhere in the world. In his 1941 State of the Union before Congress, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt formulated 4 freedoms as preconditions for a sustainable democracy and a dignified human existence. The freedoms of speech and worship, and the freedoms from want, and the freedom from fear. In the years after the Second World War, Eleanor Roosevelt worked hard to include these 4 freedoms, these fundamental rights of all members of the human family, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This milestone document in the history of human rights was proclaimed this year, 70 years ago, as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to end that every individual and every organ of society shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these freedoms and to secure their universal recognition. A lot of good things have happened since 1948 that should give us a sense of optimism. But the challenges remain. The challenge to ensure that all men and women will enjoy the 4 freedoms in their lifetime. Conflict and war still destroys people's lives. People are still starving. Millions are still seeking refuge from violence and oppression, and the effects of climate change are affecting the well-being of an increasing number of people. We all bear a responsibility to address these challenges. We all have the obligation to use our own capabilities to contribute to the cause of the 4 freedoms. The laureates we honor here today show us that we can make a difference. They remind us of our responsibilities and they show us the way forward, like President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt did more than 70 years ago. This example and the shared values that the 4 freedoms represent inspire us and give us the resilience we need to continue in our own efforts to observe and promote the respect of human rights. Mr. Erol Önderoglu, who so persistently defends the freedom of speech and expression for men and women in Turkey and abroad. His Excellency Bishop Paride Taban, who keeps the flame of hope for peace alive, not only by preaching the word of God, but by living it. Mrs. Urmila Chaudhary, who tirelessly speaks out in public for the rights of former child slaves and for girls' rights. Mrs. Christiana Figueres, as a representative of all those whose hard work and dedication contributed to the realization of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. The perseverance of Mrs. Figueres was an example and inspiration for them all. And Mr. Emmanuel de Merode and the team of the Virunga Alliance, who are dedicated to protect the flora and fauna of the Virunga National Park and the local communities that live nearby. Unfortunately, Mr. Merode could not join us here today. He had to return to the Democratic Republic of Congo because only a few days ago, a 25-year young ranger of Virunga National Park, Miss Rachel Mariska Baraka, was killed while protecting a group of persons when they were attacked by armed assailants. Since the start of this year, Virunga has already lost 8 rangers protecting the park's wildlife and its local communities. These terrible incidents show us the danger of their efforts to demilitarize the national park, to re-establish the rule of law, and to start local development. It shows us and it reminds us also the enormous courage and commitment of Merode and his rangers to foster peace and prosperity. We are honored that Chantal Marijnissen, Head of Unit for Environmental Biodiversity, Natural Resources and Wildlife at the European Commission, that she is with us today to receive the Freedom from Want Award on behalf of Mr. de Merode and the team of the Virunga Alliance. Mrs. Marijnissen has worked closely with the Virunga Alliance for a number of years. We, old, young and future generations, are connected in our responsibility to address the challenges we face, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our political beliefs, our cultural background, so we can live the healthy peacetime life President Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke of in 1941. On behalf of the Roosevelt Foundation, the Roosevelt Institute in New York, and the members of the Roosevelt family, who I'm proud to say always join us here in Middelburg, I want to thank you for being here today and for committing to dedicate yourself to the 4 freedoms. This year, the Roosevelt Foundation, in cooperation with the University College Roosevelt, has invited students from all university colleges in the Netherlands to write a column on the theme, "What does it mean to be free?" The challenge of this contest is to impress and move the audience in no more than 300 words. I don't succeed with that, I think. We received almost 60 outstanding columns from students all over the Netherlands. We had a difficult job to select the best column. We succeeded. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all an inspiring ceremony, and it's my pleasure to give the floor now to the winner of the 2018 Four Freedoms Columns Contest, Miss Cecilia Uitermark. Thank you very much.
There is no freedom without wars. As I wander through the streets of the historical city of Wrocław, Poland, it is not a tour guide who is accompanying me, but rather a multitude of little mythical creatures. Everywhere I look, small dwarfs appear in front of me. I laugh as I detect one in front of the Pizza Hut, lying flat out on a plate with a huge stomach, having eaten a bit too much. Along the river, I see a dwarf driving a tractor. And as I turn around, I spot another one, taking money out of its very own ATM. Today, perhaps a major tourist attraction and a funny sight to look at, these bronze figures are actually a reminder of the anti-communist movement, the Orange Alternative movement from the 1980s. What started out as dwarfs graffitied on top of removed anti-regime slogans soon transformed into a nationwide movement opposing the Stalinist authoritarian regime. What is so unique about the Orange Alternative is that it did not resort to violence, but the only weapon it adopted was its sense of humor. It provided Polish people with a peaceful way to fight back, making a laughing stock of the authorities. So when I am asked, what does it mean to be free? It is exactly this that comes to mind. That in spite of everything, people seek for ways to make themselves laugh and take control over their situation by mocking those who are oppressing them. The decision to harness the freedom of creativity, the power of laughter, and people's ability to transform art and humor into a tool of empowerment is what is truly liberating to me. And so it was for the Polish people.
Freedom of expression is important for any citizens, for journalists, for human rights defenders to remain involved in today's complex societies and to have a word to say on many challenging problems like political corruptions or political rights, like all kinds of wrongdoings which make this world complex. After 15 years of EU reform process, Turkey has unfortunately fallen into authoritarian regime, especially after the 15 July 2016 coup attempt. Political parties, civil rights defenders, human rights movement, and also critical media get deeply restricted and submit to crackdown. Today, as a Reporter Without Borders in Turkey, we try to maintain our solidarity with dozens of journalists behind bars, their relatives, mainstream media group under government control, and human rights defenders and opposition party leaders currently under judiciary threat. So we are a part of a very dynamic human rights advocacy groups, but the crackdown are unprecedented, and we try to raise the voice of those who don't have this possibility. What is motivating me is an ideal for facilitating the life of my colleagues, to advocate for the release of my colleagues, and I believe that isolated societies are very dangerous, and it's important to contribute for this transparency trend. The lack of recognition of the government or civil society is a very serious problem. So I believe that the best way to ensure freedom of expression is to bring strong protection to journalists, whistleblowers, artists, deeply committed to bring resonance to people's problems. The most challenging time for me was when my wife and my son visited me at prison. It was very difficult to explain to your son that you are not a terrorist, you just fight for freedom of the media. And of course, you are not a chief, you are not a terrorist. It was really challenging, but unfortunately many children in Turkey are used to learn how the life is tough and harsh. My proudest moment was when dozens of lawyers, deputies, colleagues or friends come to visit me at prison or demonstrated in front of the prison. So I said to myself, maybe you are behind bars, but you succeed to bring together all these very different people, and you deserve that this solidarity is there. When I close my eyes at night, I see many countries like Turkey dominated day after day by populist political tendencies with the support of ultranationalist groups. So my dream for the future is to live in a more sustainable Turkey and writing a book on my 2-decade experience challenge in Turkey.
It's a great honor for me to present this award to Mr. Erol Önderoglu, a highly respected journalist and especially a very brave journalist. He shows combativeness for the freedom of many. I worked as a correspondent in Turkey for many years. I witnessed and still witness the cloud of fear hanging over the country. To be more specific, I lost a colleague and a friend, the Turkish-Armenian journalist Hrant Dink, who was murdered in front of his office in 2007. Thousands of people in Istanbul demonstrated against his death. I was amongst them that day to raise my voice for Hrant Dink and for all journalists who risk their lives for controlling power anywhere in the world. I will continue doing this. Today, I speak out for you, Mr. Önderoglu. Thank you for your solidarity, thank you for your braveness, and thank you for protecting freedom of speech. You're a true inspiration. Thank you. It's a pleasure to ask Mr. Önderoglu to come on stage and accept his award.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, esteemed laureates, member of Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen. Today, you have in front of you a tired person, tired of hoping Turkey will become one day a country fully enjoying democratic values. This Freedom Award is not my first prize, but it's still certainly the one given in the most challenging and meaningful time of my career as a journalist. After 10 years of negotiation for European Union membership, Turkey has unfortunately sacrificed judiciary reform process and destroyed the standard of rule of law, especially after ending the peace process with Kurdish political groups and the terrible coup attempt in July 2016. The state of emergency in effect for nearly 2 years in Turkey has allowed the authorities to eradicate what was left of pluralism, opening the way for a constitutional reform consolidating President Erdogan's grip on the country. Over the last 4 months, at least 62 journalists have been convicted to extremely harsh sentence, and dozens of them remain, unfortunately, today in jail. Therefore, Reporters Without Borders marks Turkey as the world's biggest prison for professional journalists. Because of a succession of mass trials targeting critical voices, Turkey occupied the 157th rank out of 180 countries in the RSF World Press Freedom Index. Distinguished guests, this award is therefore for me a nice personal recognition of a long period of engagement. It will bring me strength needed in the next challenging time. I also wish it would bring resonance of Turkey's courageous human rights movement, committed to fight for the safeguard of fundamental rights, although exposed to unprecedented crackdown. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to Reporter Without Borders friends for supporting so dynamically my advocacy work. Today, I'm particularly happy to have beside me my dear family, who has shared since the very beginning of my career my challenges and my joy, and did not hesitate to share sacrifice under difficult times. Obviously, I dedicate this prize to them. Please let me finally express my deep gratitude to Roosevelt Freedom Award Committee for honoring me. To all persons and friends involved in this nice ceremony and those facilitated our stay in the Netherlands. Before ending my speech, I would like to warmly congratulate Christiana Figueres, Paride Taban, Emmanuel de Merode, and Urmila Chaudhary, also laureate of today's prestigious award, for their devotion and courage. Thank you.
We want peace in South Sudan. We want people to live as human beings, to love one another. I have seen a lot of conflict in Sudan because of tribalism. And I say, wow, I must found a village to get rid of tribalism. Because I grew up in a small town, and they brought families from all over the Sudan. And we who grew there didn't know anything about tribalism. We have a peace center. This is the hope for the people of South Sudan. And this made the neighbors, because instead of calling themselves enemies, they call themselves friends. Now that there is conflict in South Sudan, this is one of the most peaceful areas in South Sudan. We are creating it into a peace academy where we bring people from all over to learn the sense of being peaceful. And we are giving message of peace and hope. One of the things one has to fear is fear itself. And that is what people want to put in the media, to threaten people by fear. This war in the media and so on is stronger than true war. Those are the greatest weapon people use, using fear. I have lived with Muslims, I have lived with different types of religious groups, and all have got love. It is only when you divert yourself, that's where now the problem comes. The suffering comes because people become ignorant of religion, ignorant of God. I don't talk much. I pray. Because when you talk, out of 10 words, the people will pick one, which is they put according to their need. I want to pray and to do something. I want to do my action, and the action I do is to sow peace. This peace village is guided by these principles: love, joy, peace, patience, compassion, sympathy, truthfulness, gentleness. I love you. Thank you. I forgive. This what goes deep in the heart. Could be a peacemaker, not only for a country, but for the whole world. I've been a refugee from heaven to Sudan. And I will return also from Sudan to my home in heaven, but never leave the people. Difficulties throughout my life. I'm asking God that I want permanent peace.
What an honor for me to introduce Bishop Taban. You heard him say that love is the essence of religion. And today we generally, it's so often in the media, we think of religion as a source of conflict and hatred and intolerance. But he says he doesn't speak much. But he speaks in these peace camps. They have a series of phrases that I think are essential to human well-being. They're certainly essential to every single world religion that I have studied. And without these, they trip very easily off the tongue, these phrases. But if you contemplate them, you see that they make you dethrone yourself from the center of your world and put another there, without which tribalism prevails and we'll have no peace and no well-being. Here they are, these simple phrases that they study and contemplate in the Peace Village. I love you. Thank you. I forgive. We forget. We forget. Together. I am wrong. We are wrong. I am sorry. It is now my great privilege to welcome Bishop Taban to the stage.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellency, esteemed laureate, members of the Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen, receive cordial greetings of gratitude and appreciation from the entire people of South Sudan, from me and from the community of Holy Trinity Peace Village, Kuron. Thanks be to God, the Creator, to your country, and to your people in supporting people of South Sudan in peace building and humanitarian support during their sufferings. I express with deep humility my gratitude admiration and appreciation to you for having chosen me to humbly receive the Roosevelt Freedom of Worship Award. I thank those who made this possible, especially PACS and the suffering people in South Sudan. I don't consider it as a personal honor, but as an honor for all nonviolent, interreligious peace builders. I share this joy with all people in South Sudan. Holy Trinity Peace Village is an oasis of peace where different ethnic communities live together peacefully. This award gives great hope for millions of refugees in the neighboring countries, overseas, and internal displaced citizens. Our country, the youngest in the world, is going through a dark period of tremendous suffering, death, over 2 million refugees, hundreds of thousands internal displaced in church compounds, UN camps, hiding in the forests and in the swamps. People are dying silently from war, hunger, disease, anger, revenge, tribalism, corruption, trauma, and fear. Nevertheless, we also witness and recognize the abundance of goodwill, resilience, courage, endurance, commitment, self-sacrifice, and love demonstrated by ordinary South Sudanese and many regional and international friends. I commend PACS Netherlands, which has supported peace work in South Sudan for many years. It was supported and is still supporting with other partners for it to become a peace academy. This needs the continued support of Dutch government and people. Your Majesties, I place before you representatives of friends from around the world who have supported me and people of South Sudan in nonviolence, peace, reconciliation, and interreligious bridge building and development among South Sudanese for over 40 years. I would like to conclude by saying that this Freedom Award gives to the world and to the people of South Sudan visibility and recognition to the positive side of life in South Sudan that ordinary people and the peace village is carrying out. It gives courage to people who are about to lose hope. I humbly bring to an end, and this to bring to an end the war in South Sudan. What South Sudanese need today is education, food security, hospitals, road development, and self-reliance. God bless the King. The Roosevelt Foundation, the Kingdom of Netherlands, and may He bless the people of Netherlands. I remain your humble servant of the poor faithful in South Sudan. God bless you all.
It hurts to remember the war, but it is even more frightening to forget that war. When they poured across the border, I was cautioned to surrender. This I could not do. I took my gun and vanished. I have changed my name so often. I've lost my wife and children, but I have many friends. And some of them are with me. An old woman gave us shelter, kept us hidden in the garret. Then the soldiers came. She died without a whisper. There were 3 of us this morning. I'm the only one this evening, but I must go on. The frontiers are my prison. Oh, the wind is blowing. Through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then we will come from the shadow. Les Allemands étaient chez moi. Ils me dirent résigne-toi, mais je n'ai pas peur. J'ai repris mon âme. J'ai changé 100 fois de nom, j'ai perdu femme et enfant, mais j'ai tant d'amis. J'ai la France entière. Un vieil homme dans un grenier, pour la nuit nous a cachés. Les Allemands l'ont pris. Il est mort sans murmure. Oh, the wind is blowing. Through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then we will come from the shadow. Hoor de wind die fluistert en belooft als je goed luistert dat er vrede komt. Misschien vandaag of morgen.
Virunga truly is one of the great wilderness areas of Africa, possibly of the world.
Find the target now. The rebels are just behind here. They are just shooting in the gorilla sector.
When I was first nominated as a park director, 2 weeks later, there was a war that started. And unfortunately for Virunga, it sits in the middle of that. A protected area, a national park, when it's been depleted, when it's been terribly damaged, can take 20 or 30 years to rebuild, but it can be destroyed in 3 days. And because of that, we've taken on the full brunt of what is involved in protecting a national park. The huge advantage that I had when I was nominated as park warden for Virunga were the people I was able to lean on for support in trying to carve out a strategy that would help us to confront these overwhelming challenges that Virunga was facing. 150 of our men have died since 1996, since the war started. It's the hardest job to bury the men that have been entrusted to you. But even in these incredibly difficult situations, when terrible things are happening, there's an incredible determination to keep going. The park, it's about 2 million acres of land. Those 2 million acres have been set aside for conservation, which means that it's for the wildlife. It's also for tourism, it's for people to come and visit, but really it's for protecting the wildlife. But it could have been used for agriculture. So because of that, the local populations are bearing a huge cost. They can't exploit this land for agriculture, they can't make money out of it. And so we have to somehow generate value out of the park. We have to generate value for those populations living around it. And so it made a lot of sense to relaunch tourism. And in spite of the war, in spite of the reputation that we have for insecurity, we've had 100% growth in tourism 3 years in a row. The government agreed to spend 30%, all the revenue we created, for the local communities. And this has meant that we've been able to build schools. We built 9 schools around the park, rebuild the roads, really participate in that incredibly exciting project, which is rebuilding a country after a period of war. We really have every reason to be optimistic. We have every reason to keep working, to keep driving these amazing wilderness areas that Africa is so fortunate to have. But of course, you know, we really should never forget those who've sacrificed everything to make that happen.
We all live on a very beautiful planet, an oasis in the cold emptiness of space. But it's not our planet. We share it with countless other species. And we are part of nature. We are part of the ecosystem. And nature is under pressure. Every day, Earth's population grows with 200,000 people. That means a lot of pressure on nature. Climate change, deforestation, wars. We have to protect nature, its biodiversity, its ecosystems, its beauty. The Virunga Alliance does that for a treasure of nature, the Virunga Park. And not only for the park and the wildlife, also for the people around it, 4 million people. And with the revenues of the park, the people can get better life conditions. So everybody profits from protecting nature. But as we heard earlier, this involves a lot of risk, personal risk, sadly illustrated by the fact that the laureate, Emmanuel de Merode, is not here today, has to return because one of his young rangers was killed protecting people in the park. Because of the determination and the passion to do this constructive and beautiful work, sometimes with ultimate sacrifice, it's a big honor and privilege to present the award for freedom of want to Emmanuel de Merode on behalf of the Virunga Alliance. I would like to invite Chantal Marijnissen, head of the Environment Unit of the European Union, to represent the laureate.
As you've heard, Emmanuel can't be here today because he has to stay with the team in Virunga, and they need to get to the bottom of the causes behind the death of Rachel Baraka. However, he wanted to send you a message, and he's recorded a very short video that we would like to show now.
Your Royal Highness, dear friends, I would like to express how sorry I am not to be with you today, to accept this prize, which means an enormous amount to us here in Virunga. Unfortunately, the events of the last few days have made it very difficult for me to travel. But in accepting this prize on behalf of the Virunga Alliance, I would like to take the opportunity to honour the memories of those who have sacrificed everything in the belief that the people of Eastern Congo can themselves rebuild their lives and rebuild their futures. Today, above all, my thoughts are with the family of Rachel Baraka, who passed away 4 days ago from the injuries that she sustained in protecting others. Rachel was the expression of all that we've hoped to achieve. She fought and won against the misplaced traditions that prevent women from taking on the jobs that have been set aside for men. And like too many of Virunga's rangers, she died in an effort to save the lives of others. In taking stock of her sacrifice, her colleagues and friends have expressed their commitment to continue her work, to overcome the violence by offering better opportunities to a young generation of Congolese through the establishment of an economy that's driven by clean energy and sustainable development.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, esteemed laureates, members of the Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen, it's a very sad honor for me to receive this award on behalf of Emmanuel and the Virunga Alliance. We've been working as the European Union with Virunga for the past 30 years now, and it is an amazing program of development for not only protecting the park of Virunga, but the whole of the northern Kivu province. Emmanuel, as you heard in the presentation that he gave earlier on, recognizes that the park is sitting on some very fertile land and is surrounded by 4.5 million of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world. And therefore, if we want to protect the park, we also have to protect and develop the economy for the people. The Virunga Alliance is incredible. It combines security with 700 park rangers who are highly professional, who enforce law and create good governance in this region of Eastern Congo, but they're also developing the economy through hydropower plants that benefit from the park and its enormous water resources. These hydropower plants also allow a series of micro loans to tiny little companies and allow these companies to grow, to create decent jobs for the local population, and have allowed about 5% of the militia to reconvert and be part of the formal economy. Tourism, as Emmanuel was saying earlier on as well, has been a very, very important source of income. It's been growing tremendously, 40% a year. It reached $4 million last year, and they were hoping for more. Because of the recent events, they've had to close down the tourism to be able to reinforce the security and to see how they can reopen and welcome tourists back into the Virunga, but in a safe environment, both for them and also for the rangers. I think that what is really important from our view as the European Union is that now we shouldn't be lowering our arms. We need to be supporting them even more. We need to be helping the alliance to address the problems that they are currently facing, see where we can provide support to develop a formal economy around the Lake Edward with the fisheries, around the northern part of the park with agroforestry and agricultural development, to further support the hydropower plants so they can continue to generate jobs and income and help the small businesses in the region. So I suppose in a way what I'm saying is it's a call to further support the park, to further support the work of Emmanuel and the incredible team that he works with. And I would just like to thank you all from the Roosevelt Foundation for recognizing their work, which is indeed incredible. Thank you.
Namaste. My name is Urmila Chaudhary. I suffered from more than 11 years. I was a Kamlari.
सामान्यतः कमलरी भन्नाले कडा परिश्रम गर्ने बालिकालाई बुझिन्छ। तर म मात्र 6 वर्षकी बालिका हुँदा जसबाट म पनि अछुतो रहेन। मेरो दाजुले मेरो मोलमलाई गर्नुभयो। अर्थात् वार्षिक 1500 को रूपले म अरूको घरमा काम गर्न पर्ने भयो। यसरी जाँदा धेरै डराएकी थिए। मेरो जीवन एउटा डरलाग्दो सपना जस्तै थियो।
I am now an activist. At the beginning, we are just a few. Now we are more than 11,000.
अब यो सबै पूर्व कमलरीहरूसँग सहकार्य गरेर काम गर्ने समय हो। हाम्रो उद्देश्य भनेको जमिनदारको घरमा काम गर्न।
कारण चाहिँ के हो भनेपछि हामीहरु यहाँ कमलरी लिँदैछ हैन, पञ्चायतको ठाउँहरु चाहिँ पहाडीको हाम्रो सम्झा लागेको मान्छे हामी समातेछ।
उसको लागि चाहिँ विशेष के गर्दिने भनेर सरकार आफै तर्फबाट चाहिँ के नयाँ किसिमको कार्यक्रम ल्याउनु हामी किन नसकौँला, तर प्रयास गर्दै गइराख्नु पर्छ।
नेपालीहरू यसरी आफ्नो छोरीलाई बलि चढाउन नछाड्दासम्म हामीले धेरै काम गर्नुपर्नेछ। हाम्रो पहिलो विजय भनेको नै आज सबै नेपालीहरू फुलको आँखामा फुलै संसार
We are not born Kamlari. We are made Kamlari. That's why we want to be free.
I hope that someday there will be no more Kamlari, no more slavery, no more child labor. That is my dream.
What can you say after watching a movie like that? A girl said just before, the guilty people are free. I had a plan to say something, but I lost the words. Miss Chaudhary, can you please enter stage? I'm so proud to give you this Freedom Award for more reasons than I can express.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, esteemed laureates, members of the Roosevelt family, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say warm namaste from Nepal. It's my greatest honor to be receiving this prestigious award today. First of all, I would like to thank the Roosevelt Foundation for recognizing our fight against the child slavery, which was taking place in the corner of the world, far away from the center of the attention. Until 18 years ago, thousands of girls from the Tharu community used to be sold into the slavery like an animal. In the rural village of the western Nepal, the girls face gross violence of their fundamental rights, and most of them suffer the unimaginable abuse and trauma. In the year 2000, a retired lawyer from the USA Supreme Court, Olga Mori, set up freed the girls with help of activists and journalists from Nepal. I'm also one among the nearly 13,000 who have been freed from the slavery since then. When I was finally free at the age of 17, I went to the school for the first time. I believe that education alone could live out of the ignorance and extreme poverty, the two key reasons of the slavery. To have survived the generation, I used my freedom to mobilize and lead the campaign to bring into the campaign. In 2013, the Nepal government finally declared the abolition of the Kamlari practice. But fighting against the powerful people in the society was not easy, it but myself and everyone beloved that risks. But I did not stop because I was determined that I will stand up for the girls so that no girl will ever to suffer like me. Now we have our own organization called Freed Kamalari Development Forum. We work with the government and organizations like a Nepal Youth Foundation for the empowerment of the thousands of freed girls. We are not only limited to the issue of the child slavery. We also advocate for the girls' right to education and freedom from the violence. Many of the girls have now becomes leader and role model in their own community, and ran for the officer in the rent election, and the few are in the government. The girls are providing that when you can exercise through freedom, you can achieve great things for yourself and a wider community. Therefore, I accept this award on behalf of the 13,000 girls freedom from slavery, and everyone loved me making the happen once again. I would like to say thank you, Roosevelt family, bringing the issues of child slavery and the girls' right to the attain of the national and international. I would like to dedicate this freedom from fear awards and all the 13,000 of girls who stay indirectly and directly behind of the me. And once again, thank you so much for bringing me here to wonderful platform and wonderful the mic, and thank you all of you.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, laureates, esteemed laureates, members of the Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Figueres. If you live under repression, in war, or in extreme poverty, freedom is what you want above else. Yet even for the most fortunate among us, freedom is fragile too, though we don't always realize it. Freedom isn't something to be taken for granted. It's a value that needs to be defended, nurtured, and fought for every day. And today, we are here to celebrate the achievements of the laureates of the For Freedom Award. Their actions have helped obtain or safeguard people's freedom. And each of you laureates have stood up for one or all of the four freedoms we honor today. President Franklin D. Roosevelt identified those four freedoms as essential conditions for democracies to function. Today, 77 years after his historic speech to Congress, freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear remain out of reach for so many people all over the world. And today we celebrate your achievements here in the province of Zeeland. A significant part of this province lies below sea level. And although that is a scary idea for some of the people, let me assure you, we are perfectly safe here. But this wasn't always the case. 65 years ago, Zeeland was hit by a major flood. It reminded the Netherlands yet again that nature can be ruthless and that rising sea levels are a never-ending challenge for this country. After the flood, we built a unique storm surge barrier. It was an enormous project, and it took guts, perseverance, and above all, a stable democracy to get it finished, to make sure people living near the dike could sleep easily at night, knowing they were safe, even as the water rose. But it isn't the world's stable societies that suffer most from the effects of climate change. The worst affected are the poor and the vulnerable, living in unstable countries. The small entrepreneur keeping his family afloat in Dominica until Hurricane Maria demolished everything he'd worked for. The nomadic family in the Sahel that has to travel further each year to feed their livestock, until finally drought forces them to travel even further to a refugee camp. On the dry lands of the Sahel, climate change sows fear and poverty and reaps injustice. And the Paris Climate Agreement aims to put a stop to that. In 2015, no fewer than 195 countries made a deal. Together, they will take measures to keep the global temperature rise this century to well below 2 degrees Celsius, above the levels before the industrial age. What's more, those countries agreed to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And Ms. Figueres, you are here today as the embodiment of that agreement, as the embodiment of every country, every negotiator, and every party that was willing to take responsibility for today's world and for tomorrow's world, the world in which our children and grandchildren will grow up. As a chief negotiator, you guided the parties to an agreement that is ambitious, that is forceful, and unites all the 195 countries in a single goal. We are the last generation that can truly put a stop to climate change. And I'm glad that under your guidance, we have agreed to do so. And the simple fact is, we can no longer close our eyes to climate change. And the Paris Agreement showed that a lot of people, a lot of countries recognize this. And I hope that one day in future, our children and our children's children will look back on that day in December 2015 and recognize it as the day we finally managed to turn the tide. By turning our agreements into concrete actions and by making a genuine difference to the lives of those most affected by our changing climate all around the world. I feel privileged to be part of this ceremony and to see you honored, Ms. Figueres, with the International for Freedom's Medal. And Ms. Perrin Roosevelt Ireland, I would like to ask you to come and join me on stage. And of course, Ms. Figueres, may I please ask you to step forward.
My dear friends, you will forgive me, but I think the moment calls for a breach of protocol. I would like to start by saying to my fellow laureates, what an inspiration you are. And could we give them one more round of applause? And now back to protocol. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, I've already addressed my wonderful laureates. Dear Roosevelt family members, dear Figueres family members, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. We take our inspiration today from a great leader who, in the face of an excruciating decision to have to lead his country into war, did not take the low road, appealing to human fear, but rather took the high road, rousing his citizens toward a vision of a better humanity. We gather today at another moment of human history that painfully screams of confrontation, of inequity, of intolerance, and of prejudice. Some would see that as a justification for their own abdication of responsibility. We here today see quite the opposite. We see the urgency of constructive engagement with the challenges at hand. Some would say we have abandoned the four freedoms so eloquently launched by Franklin Roosevelt in his 1941 clarion call. We here to say, to the contrary, those freedoms enshrined by Eleanor Roosevelt 70 years ago into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights have been our guiding beacons over 7 decades. Each subsequent generation has taken on the Roosevelt vision and has worked diligently and courageously towards its realization. Today, we see the dividends of that commitment. The world the Roosevelt saw was one overtaken by global war, rampant diseases, few, if any, opportunities for women, and little access to education. Today, we see less poverty, worldwide increase in life expectancy, a decided decline in life-threatening diseases in all nations, more educational opportunities for more young people, exponential growth to the access of information, and greater recognition of female equity and of LGBTI rights. Human life is becoming not worse, as some would have it, but rather healthier, safer, less violent, and more prosperous. And yet, as we have heard from my fantastic 4 fellow laureates today, the task is far from done. The populism we see today is the consequence of economic inequalities that are more intensely experienced today than they ever were in the past. The isolationism we see today is the fearful retreat from the increasing complexity and interrelatedness of global challenges such as climate change, water, food security, and involuntary migration. Some would retrench from their responsibility, taking the low road and falling into exclusion and hostility. We here today heed the rallying call for more understanding, more collaboration, more commonality, in short, more love. And as we heed that call, let us do so with stubborn optimism. Optimism because we must remain firm in our conviction that with determination and ingenuity, together, we shall find a path forward no matter how complex the challenges that we face. A stubborn optimism because it is an optimism that needs to make the deliberate choice of acknowledging and addressing the ever-occurring difficulties, but not letting them paralyze the attainment of progress. It's pretty simple. Humanity just cannot afford to fail at any of our grand endeavors. My friends, the ultimate direction of history is irreversibly towards good. The arc of history does not break, it bends. And with every seemingly unsurmountable challenge that we face and conquer, it bends deeper toward more justice, more solidarity, and more freedom. I very deeply celebrate my fellow laureates today. They are proof, as we have heard, that we continue to go forth with unabated resolve in our commitment to the four freedoms. And I celebrate the millions of unsung heroes whose names we will never know, whose places we will never see, but who are the heart and soul of humanity. The millions of women, men, and children who with their daily lives strive to weave a human fabric, in Eleanor Roosevelt's words, of equal justice, equal opportunity, and equal dignity without discrimination. I thank the Roosevelt Stichting, and I welcome all of you to the growing family of stubborn optimists who continue to make the world a better place for everyone.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, honored laureates and presenters, King's Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Once again, it is my privilege, on behalf of the Roosevelt family and our American delegation, to greet you and to thank you for this wonderful event. I have been coming to these awards for over 30 years. We have gladly come together since 1982 with our Dutch friends in government and the private sector to celebrate and to remind ourselves of a moment of clarity which we shared in history and of which we were certain. The articulation by my grandfather of the fundamental freedoms necessary to maintain and strengthen a democracy, conveyed with inspiration, dignity, and a concern for global humanity. This year, I confess, feels different for me. I feel a weight I haven't felt before. And I beg you to absolve my family and my colleagues. This is my voice alone that I share with you. It would be presumptuous of me to apologize on behalf of my country, a nation I sometimes don't recognize these days. So I don't presume to do that. I am compelled, however, to share my sadness that our clarity feels somehow muddled this year. Every morning when I wake up and I turn on various media, I hunger to find a message of inspiration, dignity, and a concern for humanity everywhere in the world. It's a desperate search. But then I hear, coming over the radio waves, the words of a young Iranian citizen on the day that the United States withdrew from the international nuclear agreement and imposed more economic sanctions on that country and on others. We live in hope, he said. We live in hope. Well, shame on me, and I stand corrected. That voice, in 1941, who brought not only America, but also the whole world, hope, vision, courage, and imagination, now comes from a new generation. Perhaps all these years of commemoration has in fact spoken to our children and our grandchildren. We can and we must live in hope. There will always be Roosevelts who will come at your invitation to serve, to share a determination to live the four freedoms alongside the distinguished laureates who will always inspire and direct us. My young cousins who are here today, and their cousins who live in Maine, in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Minnesota, in San Francisco, in San Diego, in Oregon, Seattle, all over the country. They are working at jobs daily that further human dignity and wellness. They see themselves in a global context, not a narrow one. And they are raising their children to be kind, to be gracious, to be honest, generous, and full of hope. They will stand here and convey our family's greetings with confidence, because these heroes and your recognition of them will continue to live and to teach with integrity and clarity that freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of worship, and freedom of speech will triumph everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, esteemed laureates, members of the Roosevelt family, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and so much. It was an honor to welcome you here in Zeeland, our land in sea, as we call it, a land that is proud to be called Land of Freedom, and a land that considers the four freedoms as important guiding lines, guiding principles for the way in which we organize our society. I always say, and some of you know that, Zeeland is not Land's End, but it's the beginning of the world. And it has a long history of tolerance and diversity in an open society and resistant to tyranny. The challenges we face are great, but the laureates we honored today show us the way forward. Their experiences show us that the freedom is too valuable to be neglected and remind us of our common duty to advance the cause of the four freedoms. They give us hope that together we can achieve results. The Roosevelt Foundation and the Roosevelt Institute will continue to promote the four freedoms and the ideals and principles they represent. We want to thank you, our laureates, and today's presenters, and we want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your support. We will soon move on to lunch. Please remain seated whilst the royal family, the laureates, and the presenters leave the church first. Then please follow the directions from our assistants. Before we go, allow me a last remark. The realization of Roosevelt's vision for the world, a world based on four freedoms, starts here, in the way we live our daily lives, It starts with our commitment to equal opportunities for all, our respect for religious and cultural diversity, our promotion of fair trade, and our joint efforts to realize a sustainable society, starting in our own streets, our own workplaces, our own villages, towns and cities. In Zeeland, we are proud to contribute this sustainable society, and we try to be an example in our efforts to address the effects of climate change and in efforts to promote the respect for human rights. Let us be inspired by the life and work of you, of our laureates, and by the principles and ideas of the 4 freedoms that connect us all. Let's be connected now by a good Zeeuwse lunch. Thank you very much.